Today, I want to share two stories with you. The first story presents a problem that affects all of us in one way or another. The second story teaches a lesson that helps us solve the problem. And then we'll put it all together, the problem and the solution, with the hope that what we've learned from these two stories will help us gain a new perspective on the new year that stretches before us. Here's the first story. It occurs during the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens, specifically right after the women's 10,000-meter race. A runner from China won the gold medal. Athletes from Ethiopia took both second and third. But our story concerns another athlete, a 20-year-old woman from Kenya named Alice Timbili. This was her second Olympics. She also competed in the 10,000-meter race in Sydney, Australia in 2000. She finished both races, Athens and Sydney, in the middle of the pack, well out of contention for a medal. Those were the years when ABC's Wide World of Sports covered just about every Olympic event, and the coverage often included human interest stories about the athletes. Such was the case with this race and this athlete. The cameras caught Alice as she and the other runners congratulated the three medalists. But then for some reason, one of the cameras stayed on her as she walked away from the other women, sat down alone on the track, lowered her head, covered her face, and wept. An ABC reporter thought she was injured, and the reporter walked up to her and asked if she needed medical assistance. She thanked the reporter and said, "No, I'm feeling fine." "Oh, then you must be terribly disappointed," the reporter said to the runner. "Of course," said Alice. "I've been training for this 10,000-meter race every day, every week, every month since I was 13 years old. I will never again compete in the 10,000-meter, and I do not know how to fill my days now that this race has been run." Alice Timbili was so devoted to a single goal that every step she took to reach that goal filled her days and years with meaning. And then, just like that, it was over. She had run her race, and now there seemed to be nothing left. We are not Olympic athletes, but we understand what that young woman felt. Her experience is a metaphor for us. In one way or another, we too have run a 10,000-meter race. We each committed ourselves to something that was so important for so long that it seemed to define who we are. Here, let me give you some examples. For some of us, that something was being a parent. We devoted ourselves to helping our children become good and smart, healthy and productive, happy young men and women. We were mom and dad every hour of every day. Being a parent is a race that takes 18 years, often much longer, 18 years or longer to run. And it makes a 10,000-meter race in the Olympics seem like a stroll in the park. For some of us, that something was caring for a loved one who needed us more and more as the years went by, sacrificing so much of our own time, often so much of our own health, to ease another's burden. For some of us, that something was a profession, or a career, or a family business that took years, maybe a lifetime, to build. But for all of us, at some time, that race ends. Kids grow up. They leave home. They live their own lives. They begin their own families. They still need us, but not like before. Loved ones die, so do old friends, or they move away, and we are left with empty rooms and empty hearts. A career ends in retirement. We wake up one morning and realize that after 30 or 40 years or more, we will no longer go into the office. We will no longer receive copies of those confidential memos. We will never again write those important reports. Our patients will put their health in someone else's hands. Someone else will mentor our students. Our clients will seek someone else's advice. New management comes along. Businesses close or they're restructured. Jobs are furloughed or eliminated altogether. Or as we all know, a pandemic infects our world, a fire spreads with the winds. Homes are gone, lives and livelihoods destroyed, and dreams are dashed. Suddenly, everything changes. And like Alice Timbili, we wonder, what do I do now? Now that the race is run. Our second story. Long ago, there was a king who ruled over a country somewhere in the Middle East. The king's name was Kohelet, which is also, by the way, the Hebrew name of the book of the Bible that tells this story you're about to hear. English translations of the Bible call the book by its Greek name, Ecclesiastes. The introduction to the story tells us that Kohelet was the son of David, and that Israel was his kingdom, which suggests that Kohelet was actually Solomon, the third king of Israel. Now, we could debate for a long time whether or not Kohelet was Solomon, or whether he was an actual historical figure at all. But let's not go there. Let's instead regard this story as just that. It's a story. So we are then free to focus on the lesson that the story teaches. The story tells us that Kohelet decided to devote his entire life to finding the one thing that gives his life meaning. First, he pursues wealth, and he amasses more money than he could dream of, only to observe that people die, and money won't buy one more minute of a person's allotted time. So then he sets himself another one thing to find another one thing that gives life meaning, and he becomes a Don Juan of sorts, pursuing pleasure at every opportunity, only to discover that his, shall we say, prowess at age 70 is not quite what it was in his 20s. And then he decides to become the world's greatest scholar, the smartest man in the world. But he comes to realize that he just doesn't have time to read every book, to read enough to know everything. And finally, he decides to dedicate his life to designing and constructing magnificent palaces and cities. These buildings will make me famous, he thinks. This surely will give my life meaning. And you guessed it, he finds that over time, buildings collapse, cities fall, and fame fades away. And so the great Kohelet laments, if all things must end, then life has no meaning. Vanity of vanities, he says. All is vanity. Fortunately, Kohelet's life does not conclude on that sad note, and neither does his story. At the end of the book, the older but wiser king looks back on all that occurred in his life, and he comes to a life-altering realization. I spent my entire life seeking the one thing that gives meaning to my life. But I discovered that there is no one thing that gives life meaning. Instead, there is a time and a season for all things: happiness and sorrow, success and disappointment, work and rest, noise and celebration, and also silence. This, says Kohelet, this is the heart of the matter. Just as the sun sets but rises again, and the seasons turn one to the other, endings, while sad and disappointing and often painful, endings lead to new beginnings. That realization gives me hope. And you know what? It also makes me happy. The book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, is considered part of what is termed by scholars and our rabbis as the wisdom literature of the Bible. And the rabbis deemed its lesson to be so important that they made the book required reading, assigned reading for the Jewish people, which is why we still read the book every year at the holiday of Sukkot. 5 days from now, in 5 days, the old king will speak to us again. He will remind us, at some time in your life, you will run the equivalent of a 10,000-meter race, seeking to achieve that something that gives your life meaning. But win or lose, your race will end. As Alice Timbili's race ended, as mine did, as everyone's race must. And you will feel a sense of loss at the ending, as we did. You might weep. You might even mourn. And then Kohelet will say, but life goes on. And if you are open to all that life offers, you will find that there is another race to be run, and then another, and another after that. You will discover that no single race defines your life, but taken together, all the races you run, or have run, and will run, will fill your life with purpose and with meaning. Taken together, they give you hope. Taken together, they make you happy. So take time to acknowledge your losses, the old king says, and then rebuild. Acquire new knowledge, new skills, start a new job, discover new strengths, make new friends, establish new relationships, see new places, new cities, new lands, renew your family ties, bring close those who have strayed from you, return to those from whom you have strayed. Spend time learning how to be a grandparent, even a great-grandparent. Fall in love again. It's a new year. It's a new race. You are standing at the starting line. Have a good run.